Hey guys, good morning and welcome back to the Product Manager channel where we talk about product, technology, and how to build awesome software. In today's episode, I wanted to share with you a webinar that I've joined a few weeks ago organized by the Incite Group where we talk about how to build marketing campaign to create a personalized experience and engage our customer. So it was a pleasure to be joined on this webinar by some very smart people in the industry. So let me introduce you Megan Lee, who is a product marketing manager from Google, myself Tom, Lindsay Horrigan, the global head of subscription and consumer marketing at Bloomberg, as well as Carlos Gonzalez, CEO of the Product School. And together for about 40 minutes, we shared some best practices, some experience, some tips on how to create personalized mobile marketing campaign to create meaningful customer engagement and build our audience. Here are some of the questions that we've covered. How to adjust your mobile content to create snackable information. How to leverage data-driven strategy to create personalized mobile experience. How to re-engage your customer and break through the noise. Once you acquire them once, like how do you keep them coming back to your channel? And how to retain your mobile customer and create a consistent and meaningful engagement and customer journey after you engage them. A lot of great conversation, a lot of great insight. So if that sounds good to you, stay tuned, watch the video, press the like button, and if you not subscribed yet, please subscribe. That help us grow the channel. So again, thank you so much for your support, and I'm sure you will learn a lot of great topic here. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Incite Group, personalized mobile marketing that keeps your customer engagement alive. It is a pleasure to be joined by 4 fantastic panelists today as a part of the next 45-minute discussion. I would first off like to introduce our chairman and moderator for today's webinar, who's going to kick things off and start the introductions. So firstly, I would like to mention we have Carlos Gonzalez, the CEO at Product School. Carlos, such a warm welcome. I'm going to introduce you now, and it would be great to learn more about this webinar and allow you to introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome everyone to this webinar. My name is Carlos, and as Haley mentioned, I am the founder and CEO of Product School. What we do at Product School is product management training. We have 20 campuses worldwide, including San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, London, Seattle, and many others. And we do training for individuals and corporations trying to level up the quality of their product teams. We've worked with many clients all the way from startups to Fortune 500 companies such as Google, Facebook, or Amazon. And today I'm going to be moderating this panel discussion with 3 great people. I have Megan Lee from Google, I have Tom Pignard from Farmers Insurance, and I have Lindsay Horrigan from Bloomberg. So without any further ado, I'm going to let Megan introduce herself, and then I'll do the same with the rest of the analysts. Megan, please.
Thank you, Megan. I believe you're just self-muted. Thank you for that.
All right, I think I'm unmuted now, but Haley, let me know if I still need to unmute here. All right, my name is Megan. I'm a product marketer at Google on the Next Billion Users team. Our team thinks about building products for users in high growth markets, typically in more emerging parts of the world. And a lot of our users are actually mobile only. This may be their only access point to the internet. So I think this is a really relevant topic for our team and something we think about for all the different types of products that we're building out. It's nice to be here with you.
Thank you, Megan. And then I would like for Tom to introduce himself.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. So we're leading a portfolio of mobile app for farmers insurance, for customer, for different part of the business, for agents, and so on. So yeah, really excited to joining the panel today and to talk more about mobile marketing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tom. And now, last but not least, Lindsay with Bloomberg.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Lindsay Horrigan. I lead consumer marketing at Bloomberg Media, and specifically our subscriptions business. So that's essentially Bloomberg.com and our consumer mobile app that's attached to that as well. Excited to be here.
Cool. So before we start with the round of questions, couple of logistical items. First of all, welcome to the almost 1,000 people who are joining us today online. We are going to be running a few polls, like the first one that you see on the screen now, just to gauge a bit more information about your background and what you are up to. And then second thing is that, well, first of all, each poll is around 30 seconds to answer, so please start answering that first one. And then the second thing is that we'll be taking questions from the audience by the end of the panel discussion. So don't wait until the end to ask your questions. Feel free to use the chat box to write, and then I'll make sure to bring up some by the end. So the first question for the poll is, are you currently delivering a differentiated content strategy across mobile from desktop and other channels? And then you have three options. One is yes, our mobile content strategy is unique. Yes, but our content strategy needs improvement. Or no, our content strategy is mirrored across desktop and mobile. So 5 more seconds before we close the answers. Cool. And these are the results that we got. It seems like majority of our attendees here today are using a similar content strategy for both desktop and mobile. It seems like around 30% of them are doing something different and on mobile, but need some improving, and that's good to know. We'll make sure to cover some of those tips and tricks during the rest of the questions. Cool. And then I have a second poll for the audience. The question is, what portion of your customers engage via mobile compared to other devices? Again, what portion of your customers engage via mobile compared to other devices? And then we have 4 options. Between 75 to 100% is one, between 50 to 74% is second option, between 25 to 49% is the third option, and the last option is between 0 to 24%. So I'm going to give 5 more seconds and now show the answers. It's interesting. We have majority of our attendees here engaging with customers via mobile. It makes sense. That's the topic of this panel discussion. And that's really good to see that we are in the 60% of the results. There's still around 40% of the people who are, I want to believe that they are not engaging with mobile or maybe not doing it in a differentiated way. So that's something that we'll address during the next questions. Thank you for your answers. So my first question is about how do you understand your mobile consumer in order to identify the right content strategy? And for this question, I would like to get the thoughts of every panelist, starting with Megan.
To Tom for this one. Tom, do you mind jumping in there?
Yeah. So I think the first thing we, obviously people tend to do is to look at the data analytics, like how the app is performing, what are the behaviors of the user, and so on, which is always, kind of the first place to start. But I think what we're always trying to do is to look for other inputs, other channels. So whether it's your marketing team doing some research on the overall business, or your UX team doing some user interview, or maybe you have a service ops team that, just getting phone calls and feedback from customer. For us at Farmers, we have agent also getting feedback directly from the customer. So, trying to take
all of those feedback from different channels. So we have kind of like a 360 view of what the customer wants, what's working, what's not working. And then when we kind of get those feedback, I think a second thing that's very important is to not just rush in with your mobile kind of like strategy, but really try to connect with the business objective of the company and the marketing objective of different marketing campaign. And that's something the bigger the organization, sometimes the harder it gets. So really trying to narrow down on those objectives. And then hopefully once you're there, you can try to look for opportunity in your target audience, in your customer. Try to create segment based on personas, based on how a user are using your product, and then based on all the feedback that you got, you look for opportunity. See what some users are doing well that maybe you want other people to do. So look for lookalike groups, things like that. And then based on all the feedback you got, based on the analysis, you got to go ahead and make some assumption. And maybe if I present this type of content to this type of user, this segment, then they're gonna convert better, or they're gonna have better engagement. And don't overthink what strategy you wanna implement. Just kind of like use your guts, use the feedback you got, and then A/B test different campaigns. And you'll be surprised. Like sometimes everybody feels really excited about one campaign, and it kind of like flop, and you have the other campaign that surprisingly might be more successful. So continuously A/B test your campaign, your content, your product, and see what's working, and kind of like continue to iterate on this process of kind of gathering the feedback, looking for opportunity, making assumptions, trying stuff, and then just double down on what's working. Yeah.
Thank you, Tom. That's very helpful. And to follow on that question, I would like to ask you the following. So when it comes to mobile, consumers usually expect something more snackable, something shorter. So how do you adjust your mobile content strategy to the consumer's needs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good question. And especially when you think of an insurance app, that's probably not the app that you're gonna open every day on your phone, right? So things that we did, trying to focus on what is the core value of your product, of your app. And for us, we try to build around the insurance card. So you have a insurance policy, so you have your ID card that has all your information. And that's kind of like what people keep going back to. So once you have that functionality in your app, try to look for there's a lot of feature from Apple and Android, things like having the Apple Wallet available outside of your application, or the Touch ID, so you can have a quick shortcut, quick link, so that people can access those type of feature without even logging into the application. So those are things we're trying to do in general. I think I have a cool example that we've implemented a long time ago. It was during the login and during some transaction, the performance was a little slow. It was taking like 4 or 5 seconds to make the payment, for example, or to log in. So we on the login screen, we've added some little kind of did you know fun facts about about insurance and about how people drive their car and things like that. Just a very short bit of information, and people really loved it. Like first they stopped kind of like complaining so much about the performance, but they also like, oh, those little fun facts are really cool, and that's kind of like something that helped us to convey the brand and kind of like the whole how do we educate people about insurance in a fun way and fun and engaging way. So those couple of examples of things that we've been doing, playing with. I think.
Thank you so much. And now to come over to Megan. Megan, do you mind please going into a little bit of detail as to how you're really approaching and adjusting your mobile content to consumer needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Google, I think one good practice that is helpful when we think about mobile-specific content is that we actually start with mobile. So when we're thinking about a new campaign idea or we're building out a new communication strategy, we actually build out the mobile experience at the same time as the desktop experience. And I think thinking intentionally about how consumers will experience the material that we're creating is helpful, because perhaps you don't need completely different copy for the email version of or the mobile version of an email over a desktop version of an email. But if the user gets the email and the format's a little bit off and the text just seems to run on forever, that experience is completely different regardless of what the copy is actually saying. So I think having an intentional approach to mobile is key. I would say that where the difference is when we think about app experience or social media experience. Perhaps in that sense, it is important to have a little bit different context or a little bit different content. You can be a little bit cheekier or things can be a bit shorter. But even in those app and social media experiences, thinking about meeting your users where they are. So for example, maybe on desktop, you have a landscape video. It is important to make sure that when you're on mobile, that you're also serving up a portrait video, so that when they're watching it, it's full screen and not just a tiny little box that would have better been experienced on laptop. So thinking through little things like that, I think really improves how your consumers feel about your mobile presence and makes it feel consistent with what you're showing them on desktop and other devices. So I think thinking about that type of formatting and framing from the beginning is a really useful way to make sure that your mobile content is relevant.
Thank you, Megan. And I have the next question for Lindsay here. Obviously, data is a big part of any campaign marketing related to mobile or not just mobile. So I would be interested in getting Lindsay's thoughts on how do you go about delivering data-driven marketing strategies on mobile?
Sure. So just a little bit of additional context on the business and product that I work on that I think will help frame things. So essentially, Bloomberg does a lot of different amazing things, but in particular, I'm going to talk today a little bit about our news and media app that some of you may or may not have experienced, which is essentially news driven by 2,700 journalists from around the globe. So for us, just thinking also about the previous conversation, news obviously takes on a little bit of a different beast because of how rapidly it's changing every day and how much people sort of use their mobile phone to consume news. So we really think about starting from one place, whether that's web or desktop, web and app, and really think about how they're going to translate across the various platforms. And specifically as it relates to our marketing strategies on mobile, there's really three things that we think about. So one is product, because really that's some of the best marketing you can do, is making sure that your product is superior and it's adapting to sort of the customer inputs that you get across a variety of different platforms. And so one great example, as I was mentioning, that sort of fits into the last question as well, is where we really think about how we can maximize functionality and utility for our customers in this space. So we have a really cool product that we call the Bulletin. So in our typical sort of web or desktop experience, you might get a long form version of a story, but we've developed this AI-powered mobile feature that refreshes news summaries, essentially a little bit longer than a headline, on the home feed, so that users don't have to actually click away, but they can get a quick, snackable, digestible bit of information, and sort of keep people where they are, since we're also trained to sort of be within a feed. It's sort of our version of being able to do that using some really cool technology underneath that. And of course, we have a number of other features and benefits that we leverage on the product side to kind of do the marketing for us. The second area that we really focus on from a marketing strategy standpoint is audience. So we've gotten quite sophisticated actually in our audience segmentation, and we really look for markers of intent and other characteristics or actions that a user's taken so that we can actually customize the experience to the best of our ability. So most of that sort of starts with what someone's actually doing within our app or on our website. But we try and actually incorporate other pieces of information that actually go above and beyond our own platforms. So we can sort of start to weave that experience together. For example, someone who has opened, let's just call it like 5 or more push alerts from our app, it's likely that they're much further along in sort of their conversion experience, because we actually sell subscriptions within our app as well. So we're going to customize the experience and the messaging to that person who's opened up a bunch of apps to be quite different from someone who maybe has only just now downloaded the app and is getting sort of their first taste of maybe what our content is or what our brand is like or the experience. And if we sort of use a one-size-fits-all strategy for both those two people, we probably won't be as successful. And then the third one is actually test and learn. So we really have a culture of test and learn here at Bloomberg, where we take a data-driven approach across all the things that we do, frankly, because we're really a technology and data company. But specifically within the mobile app experience, we've really used it as a testing ground, since the majority of our audience is actually on web, and our more sort of deeply engaged and loyal audiences in the app. It's a great place for us to try out different things and experiment. So specific to the business that I lead, obviously for those of you who are sort of news readers on any of the variety of websites globally, you'll know that many of those companies use sort of a number of articles per month that you're allowed to use. So we've developed various segments within sort of our app user base where we're testing out various wall heights, so how many articles a user can actually ingest before we ask them to pay. And we're using sort of propensity modeling to be able to tweak and customize sort of how many articles someone is asked to read, but also like what point in the journey do we actually ask you to pay for something, or maybe try a different feature or read one of our newsletters. And the smarter that we get around that strategy is really only a result, frankly, of testing and learning. You have to start somewhere. And it's really a great place for us to do that with pricing, with messaging, with different features that we're trying out. And once we kind of have some data points as it relates to how people are engaging the app, we'll usually try and scale that, obviously, of course, across the app, but we'll also do that on web and desktop as well.
Thank you, Lindsay. I have a follow-up question for Megan. So at the beginning, when you mentioned that when you launch a campaign, you think mobile at the first time, you know that people get very distracted on mobile. There are so many alternatives out there. So how are you breaking through all these no's to keep your customers coming back?
Yeah, I think that's a really relevant question for today when users are kind of bombarded with content. So whether that be on email or through all the different apps they have on their phone that they may not even remember they have, I think it's important to think thoughtfully about when, where, and why you're reaching out to a user. And I think this actually goes really well with what Lindsay was just mentioning before this, of thinking about where the users are in their customer journey. So the differences between a brand new user, an existing and loyal user, or a user who's lapsed, or a really light user who only visits your app or your mobile website a few times a month or once a month or even fewer times than that. And I think one way to tailor the content is taking advantage of the timeliness of things. So if you have a brand new user who, let's say, downloads your mobile app, knowing that user, it's top of mind for them. They downloaded it for a specific reason, and you really only have so much time to activate that new user. A lot of times users will download your app and then forget they even have it. I think the statistics are that within the first week, only 13% of apps are still active for a new user after they've downloaded. So how do you take advantage of those first 7 days to send the right push notifications, to try to bring them back into the app? And when we think about activation, we really think about what's the core value prop of your app. So what's that key feature, that key action that you want your users to experience? And then how do you tailor your content to kind of push them towards experiencing that magic moment or trying that key feature so they can then unlock all the other use cases for your app, or go a little bit deeper into understanding how to use it or make it a little bit more personal for them. And so that's kind of how we think about new users. when we think about existing users or some of your more loyal users, it's also thinking about making sure that you can make them feel valued. So perhaps they've been on your app for a while, or they're more familiar with your business model, or they read a lot of your content, they already know who you are. I think making sure that the content you send them is a little bit more savvy, is a little bit more personal. It's not kind of as elementary, it's kind of recognizing that they are a part of your community, that they already know the basics. If you kind of do, like Lindsay said, a one-size-fit-all approach, it just means that nobody really resonates with what you're sending. So that's kind of a few ways we think about making sure that what you're sending to users really breaks through the noise and isn't just adding to the clutter in their inbox or the multitude of push notifications they wake up to.
Thank you, Megan. Quick reminder for everyone in the audience, feel free to continue asking questions on the live chat webinar. I have a quick question for the whole audience in the form of a poll. Obviously, daily active users, monthly active users, and all those metrics are critical. So think about the majority of your users and how often do they engage via mobile? And we have 4 options: daily, weekly, monthly, or not sure. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds to respond. All right, so we have the answers here. It's amazing to see that almost 50% of the attendees here today engage with their users on a daily basis via mobile. That's huge. And then the second largest option is unsure. I guess that's probably because the question is very open-ended. Obviously, if you look at it, it's hard to make a final decision just based on all your audience. You probably want to segment that and know, okay, what are your power users and what's their frequency versus what is the majority of all your users, and maybe some users that are not engaging that much with your content. But it's good to see that everyone is thinking mobile and that the vast majority of our attendees here engage with their audience at least once a week. Perfect. So I'm going to move on and ask the next question. So view afterwards. So question is marketing. It's about marketing and data analytics. What do you do in order to understand your customers more deeply? How do you measure their behavior, or what else do you do in order to really believe that you know what your customers want on mobile?
Sure, I can jump in first on this, Carlos. So for us, the big place we start is with DAU, so daily active users. News is usually consumed daily by most people, but there are a variety of news sources out there, with obviously different flavors and approaches. So for us, we really, our sort of winning KPI is, are we getting someone to come back each day and engage with us? And of course, if they're engaging multiple times a day, even better. Because in all likelihood, we have a little bit more of a niche slant on news since it's financial. We may, our long tail audience is really probably only coming back a number of times within a given month. But with an app, knowing how many people are actually engaging with you every day, that really, to your point, Carlos, helps you set apart who's sort of your power and your power users and your sort of more loyal audience that you're working with. Some of the other engagement metrics are really important too, because there's a really big difference between just opening up the app and actually engaging with our content or some of our features. So we really look at how many actions a user takes while they're in a given session, whether that's possibly streaming our live television station within the app or watching some of our video on demand, how many articles they're reading, what's scrolling look like. Those are all really important for taking a pulse and understanding. But quantitative is really only one part of the story. The other part of that is really qualitative, right? So we also, are pretty detailed about utilizing sort of UX research where we're observing people, but also in-depth interviews with certain users that we've sort of identified that fall into various categories, and really understand the why behind our users' behavior. So, it's one thing really to look at the quantitative data set and see you had these clicks here, or someone, selected that, but what's motivating them to make those decisions? Where's their head at? What's sort of the behavioral mindset that someone has when they're engaging with our product, and what are maybe the barriers to them engaging with us more. So we really look at how we can do that. We'll set up sort of in-depth one-on-one conversations, but we also have engaged in sort of a panel program where once a month we're sort of getting a variety of users together to really understand what's going on, what are they seeing. It gives us a chance to get like new prototypes out there and get it and feedback from them as well. And then the other piece that we sort of append to this is really like audience profile data. So beyond just like what someone's doing in the app, you really want to understand some of this other information about that you can leverage via surveys that we do in app, that sort of pop up at various points in time. And then we also try and leverage data from other platforms. There's some blind spots still. Just I think that's one of the challenges, obviously, with Google and Apple owning the majority of the mobile platforms for apps, and so there's a few places where you can't really see that. Maybe Megan has a different perspective, but for us, we really want to know what the whole story is. So what someone did in our app, and how does that connect to maybe what they did when they closed out the app and possibly flipped over to a mobile web area, or maybe they have their desktop in front of them and they're going back and forth, or possibly even watching something on TV, or they visit Facebook. So the better that we can actually understand the whole picture and sort of append that to what we know about what happens inside our app, the more impactful actually our marketing strategy and customer experience can be, because we can use that data to sort of fuel a more holistic experience.
Thank you, Lindsay. What about you, Tom? What are you guys doing in order to deeply understand your customers' behavior on mobile?
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's very similar to what Lindsay was saying, where I think we started first with getting really good with data analytics within the app itself. With working with some analysts and even looking at some AI recommendation models for like simple use case like the recommendation, cross sell, and things like that. And that allows us to kind of like really optimize for our mobile app channel. But now the next journey and the next steps on this journey is how do we pull in all the channels that we have together so we can have an holistic view of our customer journey across the mobile app, the web, advertising, email campaign, and so on. And that's kind of like the hard part. And I think we also have some gap in this journey, but in the understanding. But I think this is really going to unlock us, all of us marketers, to really and get a better understanding of our customer, and so we can provide more value, engage them more, bring the right message at the right time in their journey, and ultimately, improve all the metrics and the ROI. So that's kind of like what I see, where a lot of, especially the large company that have a lot of data on many different channel are kind of like really trying to focus on, and we certainly one of those. So yeah.
Thank you, Tom. So my next question is for Megan. When we think about the user funnel, it usually starts at the beginning when someone starts consuming information. At some point, they sign up for our product or service, and then obviously we need to continue engaging with the customer until eventually converts into a paid customer. So I would love for Megan to share some examples on how you go about not just acquiring the user, but what do you do specifically on the engagement level in order to keep that active before they become a paid customer.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm actually going to flip this question a little bit on its head, because it sounds like we're saying, what happens after we acquire a user? How do we make sure we retain them? How do we make sure they're engaged? So I would say one crucial part is also, how are we acquiring them, or who are we acquiring? Oftentimes we think as long as we get a download, all downloads are equal. And I personally don't think that's true. I think that the app experience, unless you're a pure play business, which means you are app first, app is your only business experience. For most businesses, app is only one component of your marketing strategy. So I would say apps aren't necessarily the right avenue for every single user. This may not be the avenue that they end up spending or paying for whatever service or good you have. So I'd say being intentional about who you want to acquire. So who is this app mainly built for? Is it for your tier of power users? Is it for the most savvy customers? Is it for the users who come back for a specific reason? And then tailoring your acquisition strategy to try to reach those people in particular. And then I think it's a lot easier to have a consistent engagement strategy once you bring them on. So once you've acquired them, kind of knowing who they are helps inform how you reach them in that onboarding stage. And then once they're onboarded, knowing the types of content that will resonate with them, again, roots back to knowing who they are. And I think just thinking about acquisition and retention and engagement as kind of one linear path instead of thinking of them as different areas. I've seen at Google, for example, where sometimes we have this disconnect where there's people focused on acquisition and a completely different group of people thinking about retention. And I think sometimes that's where you see the disconnect, because we're building content or we're tailoring messaging for users who aren't consistent or aren't the same kind of, don't have the same characteristics, because we're acquiring them from all over the place. So I think making sure that the users you're bringing on are kind of ready for that mobile app experience will really help when thinking about how to tailor the content to them.
Thank you, Megan. And then I have the last question for the audience before we open up the floor. So the question is, you see it on the screen soon, are you using data to personalize your mobile marketing strategy? And the options are yes, we have a sophisticated strategy in place, yes, but we need room for improvement, not yet, but plans to, or no. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to answer. Great, thank you for participating. Again, happy to see that the majority of the attendees are on the yes side. Majority of them say yes, but they recognize the need for improvement, which is why we are here today. It's great to see that there's 7% of people who have a sophisticated strategy in place, and at least the people who are not doing it yet, they have plans to do so. So that's great. Now I'm going to open the floor and start picking some questions that you've been asking during the panel. So my first one is about marketing and product. Marketing and product is important because if no one knows about it, the product won't be used. So do you work with product teams? Yes. What is your contribution to the team, and what was the outcome in the product created? I'd be curious to hear from Lindsay's experience first.
Sure. So I work incredibly closely with product. So I mean, and I have in frankly all of my marketing and sort of business management roles. It's a really critical. The function of marketing and product has to work together hand in hand, right? But they each sort of bring something slightly different to the table. So for us, frankly, there's sort of a collaborative model that I have going with my team and my sort of partner that leads product, where we're really assigning sort of a marketing manager and a product manager to almost all of our major initiatives. And there's of course times where like someone sort of takes a lead more than the other, depending on what the initiative is. But frankly, most marketing strategies can't be done without some level of engineering lift at this stage of the game if you have a technology product. So more and more, I actually think about hiring marketers who are much more sophisticated, frankly, in understanding how development work happens, like understands code, and understands sort of the big picture of agile methodology. And then on the flip side, I think more and more product managers probably have interest in understanding, to the questions, I think, point is just because you build it doesn't mean they'll come, actually. And so how are you thinking about, frankly, how something will go to market, whether that's a feature or a product or something else? Who is it for? How is it going to get monetized? And frankly, when you aren't thinking about those things on the product side, you really miss the mark. And so marketing just tends, I think, have much more interaction at the ground level with the customer and sort of that feedback, and usually tends to be a bit more tied in with sort of some of the business monetization metrics. And so the combination of the two is really critical, because if you don't have sort of collaboration and alignment between those two, it's really hard to see how you're going to be successful with whatever it is you're launching.
Thank you, Lindsay. And this one is actually for everyone. And it's interesting because we've been focused the conversation on mobile, and I want to think a little bit about web. What are some of the key metrics that you use on mobile that help you drive engagement for website? Or put in a different way, when you are delivering your marketing strategy on mobile, what are some of the indicators that you can see there that say, hey, maybe we should implement some of these on web as well? So let's start with Megan, and then we continue with Tom and Lindsay.
Sure. Happy to take this one. So it sounds like we're talking about metrics for understanding kind of what we're testing in the app. I think it's really specific to what you're testing. When we talk about engagement, it's thinking about engagement as a funnel and saying that there's deeper levels of engagement. So saying, what's the difference between someone opening an email and how much time they actually spend in it? And the difference between within an app, saying how many times do they open the app, but also every time they open it, how long do they spend in it? So testing kind of session length. And then within that of saying, what is the typical behavior of a power user, and kind of having an idea of the key metrics you're looking for that associate with a user that is super loyal, is super engaged, and tends to stay on the app for a while. I think examples of metrics would be things like whether or not, let's say you're a gaming app, whether or not users actually complete in-app purchases. So I think typically only 5% of users within gaming apps actually complete in-app purchases. So let's say you know that statistic and you can easily identify a metric like an in-app purchase. I think that's a good way for you to then look at user behavior, and there are analytics tools out there, even outside of Google Firebase solutions, that allow you to then follow that type of user and say, hey, I know that they do in-app purchases, then what other behaviors do they do that lead to that? Maybe it's that they reached a certain level in your game, or that they tend to play with friends, and that's one mode of playing that they lean towards. So I think it's hard for me to give you specific metrics that are kind of the key, but I think that's a good example of kind of looking for behavioral patterns and then finding the specific engagement factors that set them apart, or indicate that strong engagement and loyalty aspect for you.
Thanks so much, Megan. And to jump over now, I'd like to ask the same question to Lindsay, if that's okay. So Lindsay, we actually had a member of the public listening come through with the same question. So looking at what are some of the key metrics that you're using to understand what you have tested on your mobile app is worthy of being used to influence what you do on your website. Lindsay, do you mind jumping in there?
Sure. So one of the more important things that we try and do actually is try and get at the person level. So, and really, while you really want to be aware and cognizant of platforms, whether that's app or mobile web or desktop, at the same time, the reality is it's people that you're trying to reach and you're trying to customize things for. So when possible, our sort of first stab at that is really understanding who the person is behind whatever it is that we're testing within the app. So for us, we have a segment of people that utilize both the web and the app. And so understanding how that segment of people interacts with something we're doing in the app is probably going to be different from the people who are sort of app-only users. And so that's sort of one of the first cuts that we'll take a look at before we scale something on the web. And then we start slow, right? So you have to use a little bit of intuition as well. Like sometimes there's things that we do that are clearly very specific to an app audience, but a lot of times what we're thinking about, whether that's messaging, pricing, or broad experience things, there's probably a good chance it's still relevant for web, but you want to sort of dip your toe into the water sort of slowly, particularly when you're potentially doing something that could cause revenue risk or maybe customer experience risk. If there's some things that's sort of a no-brainer, we'll scale fairly quickly and have a smaller holdout group. But if it's something that we think there are some nuances between our audience segments that are on web versus an app, we'll start with only maybe 10% of an audience population versus sort of going full bore at 100%. And you can always back test stuff as well and have a holdout so that you scale it as much as possible, but you still just confirm that your hypothesis was correct, that this would be valuable for a broader audience. So it's really a combination, I think, of looking at that segmentation and who is that person, the people data behind it, and then also trying to use some of your own sort of intuitive decision making to be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And just coming on to another question from the audience to Megan. There's been a lot of conversation here around how we're trying to drive collaboration between marketing and product. And when it looks at that collaboration, is that something that should be working? Megan, when it comes to what you're doing at Google, are you collaborating with product development teams? Could you share a little bit more about that dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is yes. So in every type of marketing role I've been in at Google, there is a close collaboration with product. I do think there's a distinction between when you're focusing on growth and when you're focusing on core product marketing. In my current role as a core product marketer, we spend pretty much weekly, we're in meetings with product, and we're kind of in this earlier stage of building out a product idea. And so I think it's a little bit more of a natural flow of marketing having a seat at the table. A lot of thinking kind of goes hand in hand. So as we're building out the idea for a product, improving out value prop, and figuring out who this product is being built for, marketing really brings a lot of insights and data-driven insights to the table. So being able to have that in-depth knowledge of who the user will be, and then also being able to show that we have the ability to use data to inform decisions or show us new insights, I think product finds that very valuable. And so if we're able to kind of effectively use those strengths that marketers have, I do think it's a very natural collaboration, and you slowly become a part of the integral almost product team. That we joke sometimes as product marketers that we feel more like a part of the product cross-functional team rather than part of the marketing team, because we work with other marketers, but our day-to-day is really working with the product managers, with engineers, with the program managers, with BD, with whoever else might be on your team. I do think on the side of when you're in a marketing role that's more growth oriented, I still think there's an opportunity to work with product. I just think that you have to work a little bit harder to kind of get that message across. But experiences that I've had in that type of role is realizing that there are still things we're learning through our growth efforts, right? Maybe we learned that actually the user we thought we were targeting is slightly different, or there's some insight about this user and how they're experiencing the product that we're learning through our growth initiatives. And being able to bring that back to product to say, hey, this is important, and kind of show them the story, tell them the story, show them the data. And even if it's not as much of an everyday working collaboration, it's still something you can kind of bring back to them time and time again. And I've personally seen, even at a company as large as Google, being able to influence kind of the product roadmap or what's being prioritized. So I guess regardless of what specific focus you do have, I think it's a critical part to always be thinking about product excellence and how that goes hand in hand with marketing and the work that we're doing.
Thank you so much, Megan. And I know we're coming towards the end of the webinar, so we're going to quickly pass over to Thomas. Thomas, same question to you. Are you working heavily with product and marketing? Are those two teams, collaborating on a day-to-day or weekly basis?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I can bring different perspectives because I'm more on the product and engineering side. But however, we have our product marketing working. They're essentially part of the agile team. Um, so we have product marketing working with the product owner and the dev, and we if there's a new features or a new idea or new problem to solve, we have kind of like kickoff meeting or brainstorming meeting. Uh, so we actually have a lot of example where the dev team came up with a POC, like a little prototype, and then we shared with our marketing team, and then they were able to kind of craft a story around that. So it's really collaboration and ideas come from many ways. Um, so and the other thing I would add is kind of like the same agile incremental process that we're using on the dev side. We're also doing that on the marketing side. So trying small campaign quickly, maybe with a smaller audience, and then kind of like scaling up the campaign once we start collecting results. If it's working. Uh, so yeah, so the both product marketing engineering work really really closely together on a daily basis.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And I know that time is up now. We've unfortunately run 5 minutes over due to a few questions coming in there. But I just want to thank both Tom, Lindsay, Megan, and Carlos for all being involved in today's discussion. My name is Hayley Dunn, Head of Strategy at Incite Group. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you all involved. And just to get a last bit of information, I am running one last poll on the screen, and all the answers from this poll I'm actually going to share with you. This is anonymous. It's really to help each other out, help the community with some great recommendations as to the tools that you are using to help advance your mobile marketing strategy. We're hoping to collate a few great recommendations whilst we have a great group online. And in my follow-up email, I will be sharing these results with you. This will just help you all get a little bit of insight into some of the tools that can help accelerate your mobile marketing. Once again, thank you so much to our 4 great panelists on today's webinar. And it's been a pleasure to have such a great turnout for this discussion. I'm going to leave you all now. Please enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, or evening if you're in London like myself. And I hope you can join our future webinars or come to our Open Mobile and Digital Experience Summit in November in San Francisco and discuss more around mobile marketing, product strategy, and digital experience in person. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.